you have to be someone that fits into this team. But then on the more specific one is you work in teams of multiple skill sets, right? And you have to understand, especially when the engineer talks to a designer, the designer may talk to a salesperson and so on. How do they think? You have to build up this empathy. So you need this crossbar to really connect to the other person, understand their problem, because you might have a totally different perspective on a problem because you have this additional knowledge, right? And this is definitely something that I'm looking for in people that are coming into our team when they're young. Our team is in general really young. It's for SAP, who has an average, I think, of 45 years in Germany, and in Silicon Valley, my team is roughly 28 years in average. So it's really, really young. And I myself, I became a manager of a team of the size of 100 when I was 28. So that is something where we have to carefully select people that have this crossbar, then also have what you were saying, that can build up the additional skills that are necessary. Because when you jump these ladders, and I also realized in my career, it is really a problem. I jumped basically from a single contributor, jumped 2 levels, and there are definitely skills that you're lacking, and you have to find the people that are able and are willing and are realizing that they're lacking maybe the crossbar, right? Or like additional components of that crossbar to widen it a little bit more. And that is something that I also saw in my early career that I was lacking. Once I jumped, I definitely missed the step of building product and really diving a little deeper into the additional functions of sales, maybe a little bit more go-to-market. I was always good with the creativity side, coming up with problems and so on, but I was missing more of the fundamental pieces. And I think what SAP is really good at, where large corporations are good at, in realizing that and giving you the right tools on hand. So one thing that SAP quickly realized when I came on board, they saw the potential, but they said, you know what, you're not ready yet, Peter. And that's also a skill of engineering leaders, I think. They have to realize when there is a skill gap. And I realized that through the help of SAP and also through my daily business. And then they said, okay, we have to give you an executive coach. You need someone on your side that is actively coaching you along the way and pointing out the failures, the problems, and put the finger into the wound, right? And that is one additional point that I really appreciated from a large corporation, that they gave me this additional help to grow and saw the potential and helped me to widen really my crossbar. An additional point that I think is also really important that I realized, it is important to have, I oftentimes call it parental supervision. That's what I actually received really early, because I was given not just alone the chance to head the innovation center. I was the technology leader. I was more the outgoing person that was acting with the customers. But I got someone on my side, his name is also Mohan actually, who was taking care and making sure that I'm, additional to the coach, that I'm going the right way. And I think this is really something that is crucial. This mentorship, the potential that they see, but also the mentorship and the realization of an individual that you might not have the skills immediately, and the acceptance to widen this crossbar. And that's what I'm looking for people. They don't have to be necessarily perfect, but I want to see that potential so that I can widen them. Because when we hire engineers, I'm expecting them to have the expertise. That is something that is given. But when you're an engineering leader, I'm expecting them to build up that crossbar and realizing their gaps in order to fill and widen the crossbar.
So there is really a common theme. So it's like a mentorship, coaching. Now, this is supposed to be interactive. So I invite questions from the audience. So opening remarks we did. So this is really, I do have questions for the panel, but I would love to hear actually what you would like to hear from the panelists. So. I will continue with my questions, but raise your hands, okay? Okay, I can do it.
Hi, Peter. You talked about having leadership training basically in your company, and I'd like to know what companies do that, and who was your leadership trainer, and what did he teach you? Because this is probably the most important thing we should have in every company. Most companies are too tight-chested. They play the cards too close to their chest about what they know, so they don't share it with everybody. So tell us more about that part of your story.
Okay, well, this is part of the exercise for me.
Yeah, it's hard to answer which companies do that. It's always hard. I can just say at this point, SAP has been the company that was giving me that opportunity to do it. And the coach, you're asking specifically about who's the coach, and that was for me early on when this came up, that I need an executive coach, or I should have one. That was a question, whom do you pick, right? For me, that was a question, do I go with a coach that is very close to Germany, really maybe represents the German mindset, or do I go with someone that has more the Silicon Valley mindset, right? So there are two ways to look at that. For me back then, I wasn't really sure how to handle that, and then I went also through various mentorship conversations with friends and with people that I know, and I eventually decided for a coach from Silicon Valley that has more the American mindset, because I'm very German company, so I thought, hey, that augments me nicely. And so he's a coach that basically also coached Reid Hoffman basically in his early years of LinkedIn and so on and so on. So he has quite experience with Silicon Valley. And the first couple of things, the first sessions, it was really hard to come down to what I was lacking, right? Because there was so much, and I want to be really clear that there was a lot of problems on my side that we worked on and we tried to come up with. But one big theme was I'm a very impatient person, and sometimes when conflicts come up, I don't realize what is the other side thinking, right? So he taught me some good methodologies to build up the empathy and to have compassion for how other people have certain dynamics in their head, why they're doing certain things. And all the things that he taught me eventually was nothing about technology or nothing in really my field of innovation or so. It was really interpersonal relationship handling that was the core of what we have been doing, and now we've been doing that for 1.5 years. I have been for 1.5 years, and I mean we have done also like storytelling, these kinds of exercises, which you also need as leader. I think you have to be able to go out there and tell a compelling story and so on. Would you ask me, have I completed all of that? Am I there yet? Most likely not. I think there's still a lot of stuff that I can learn, but I've definitely improved. But this point of having compassion and empathy for the other side, being able to see the other side, reflect on it, and build up this framework, how they might think about a certain problem, and how to convince them, how to negotiate to get my way, that is definitely something that he taught me in the hard way, because I was someone that always wanted with the head through the wall kind of thing. That was something that I learned from him, and that where it was really valuable, and where I also honestly appreciated SAP's help a lot along this journey, that they gave me the trust and also gave me the funding basically to do that, because it's definitely not a cheap thing.
Can I let me add to that question? So I got my first leadership training at Apple. I got leadership training again at Fujitsu. I got it again at Schwab. Apple had Apple University. Fujitsu brought in outside organizational development and leadership training folks to do that kind of training. Schwab had Schwab University. There are some mediums, so I began to think, so if you have the good luck to be in a large company, you may have the opportunity to get some management leadership kinds of training. I'm seeing now some medium-sized companies, so I don't know whether Twitter's a medium-sized company or a large company, but they bought Marco Gargenta's company, and then they laid him off a couple of years later. But he was building a peer mentorship and leadership model inside of Twitter, and he's continuing to build that on his own. Credit Karma is building, they're modeling it on Apple University, because the person who's building it knows some of the people who built Apple University. They're building Credit Karma University out of San Francisco. And so I think that's a medium, I don't think that's a large company at this point. So there are some medium-sized companies that are beginning to do that kind of thing. To the coaching thing, it's been really interesting. So I live in San Francisco, so I get more of that startup. I'm more surrounded by it than I think we feel down here in the Valley. And 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 I'm doing a lot of consulting, so I'm in a lot of startups, either advising or mentoring or training teams in Agile or taking on interim VP engineering roles, and I find that an awful lot of CEOs who are venture funded their venture funders are saying, we want you to get a coach, or here's a coach for you, one or the other, and it flows downhill from there. And so I think there are more VPs of engineering and this is happening. This is where several of my coaching clients have come from, is a CEO saying, I think my VP of engineering needs some coaching, and my response is, well, does your VP of engineering think he needs some coaching? Because if he doesn't, that's not going to work. And they go off and have a conversation, and sometimes they come back, and sometimes they don't. But I think that's beginning to flow downhill. This idea that leadership isn't born; it's trained and practiced and coached.
Maybe one more quick addition to what you have been saying. I think, yes, you definitely have to be open to it, right? That's definitely one critical thing. And I was also happy that I could choose, right? It was not that, as we said, hey, you have to take this coach. That was definitely a really fortunate thing, which I liked. But also, don't think of it that only this opportunity, in this more wide circumstance. In my case now, I was given a personal coach, but also SAP has, as you said, also certain coaching and mentorship programs from within. That's also something that I've been heavily recommending to my interns, and from intern on to actually my full-times, that they should take these opportunities within the company, because it doesn't always need a coach for a couple of $1,000s a month. It can also be just the colleague that has lived through that or who is on a certain level. That's also something that is really, really helpful.
And I take a whole different perspective, right? So early stage startups, the things that we are involved, they're hard, really hard. You have to have the stomach. So when I recruit those people, I tell them, there will be days where you either want to slit somebody's throat or slit your throat.
That happens even in enterprise.
Right? Or because you don't know. There are times when you know it all. When there are times you have no clue what company is doing or what others are doing. And so what happens really is, really there's no time for culture, really. It's the matter of survival at that point in time. And really, at that stage, all you have to do is, you got to hit that deadline. And so as a leader, the thing is, you got to push them hard, but at the same time, you have to have a lot of empathy, because you don't want to break your team, right? So you really don't want to break them, but you really have to push yourself and push the team hard, because there really is no time for culture or anything, because you have to have where at 4 a.m. you're still exchanging the smileys. If you're not working in the office, you're working, but that's how much of hard work it is to really in that stage of time. And so one of the things that I shamelessly borrow this whole thing, back when I was at Zynga, Mark Pincus had this whole thing called be your own CEO, right? And that's very powerful, and that's very applicable for an early stage startup. You have to have your own, you have to develop these leadership, because what happens is, as the company grows and be successful, you are going to groom your into a leader where people will start working for you, right? At the stage of early stage startup, there are no levels, right? It's a flat organization. You have co-founders and you have staff engineers and probably one product guy, right? And that's it. Engineering guy, girl, product guy, girl, and co-founder. That's it, right? So there's nothing. But it's how you actually survive through that and develop those leadership skills is what will come in. And of course later, as they're funded, it requires a lot more finesse and skills in terms of how do you conduct the business, how do you do the sales, and that's when the VCs definitely will step in and says you need an adult supervision in terms of how you want to, right? Because you can't be that maverick and still run it when the company is up to a certain level. But really, like early stage startups, it's a whole different thing.
Can I ask you a question? You mentioned that culture doesn't come from or it doesn't exist in an early stage startup. I would strongly disagree that even though you work hard, and I would actually challenge the statement that not enterprises or in the innovation center, I would say also teams work really hard, but still, even you work hard, you should be able to build a culture. What's your statement to that? Because I would like to get a little bit more background why you think that, because I would argue that even though you work hard, you play hard, and that brings a certain culture with it.
I mean, so the way it is, as a leader, what happens in these early stage startups is you actually cultivate when you recruit people, there are a bunch of passionate people, right? And they're extremely passionate, and there are these people where you have this grand vision, right? Everyone wants to boil the ocean, but you also have to remember that we are all working. There's burn rate, right? And there's this money, and you have this certain amount of time that you got to get your product there, and you have to survive, right? So at that point in time, what really is you collimate people's passion and have a clear and clean roadmap in how you want to build, right? But at the same time, you don't want to break others, you don't want people not to work with each other, but there's no disciplined way of building the culture, right? So it's like it is where you take all these passionate people and you would do it. And so there's when I said there's no culture, meaning there's literally no culture or nothing like that. It's just that you're bound by your survival. You're bound by getting your first customer and getting your MVP done. And so you literally have.
But this excitement, don't you think that creates actually the massive culture and the massive force and pull that we see in startups actually?
That's there, but then from my own personal experience, right? So building these startups where